Welcome everyone to our Homeowner 101 Lawn Basics Workshop. This is one of the workshops that I actually love doing. I think Mike does as well. My name is Joe Cobb and I'm joined by my good friend here,
Mike Cartozo.
and we're excited to bring this information to you today. Lawn basics, there's a lot of stuff you want to cover when it comes to lawn basics. Things about mowers. We always get asked about feeding and seeding and when do you weed. And then we also talk a little bit about when to water. These are things that every homeowner needs to know because if you want your lawn to be the envy of the neighborhood, well, you've come to the right place, right, Mike?
Yes.
All right, so first off, let's jump into it. The most important part, you've got to mow the lawn. Nothing looks more horrendous than a poorly mowed lawn or just a lawn that is not mowed at all.
Right.
But there's some things you got to know. So first off, let's talk about actually how you do it. There's mowers involved. Mike, we have great conversations about this all the time. Tell us a little bit about some of these mowers.
Well, real quick before I get into the actual mowers, I did want to make the point that you just made me think of. We've all either lived in a neighborhood or driven through a neighborhood where the lawns are really well maintained.
Yes.
See that one that either isn't or never has been.
Don't let it be you. Don't let it be
That
you.
person.
Yeah.
So yes, when it comes to lawnmowers, you do have a lot of options. And if you're a new homeowner, or maybe you've owned a home, but maybe didn't have a lawn or had a little lawn that maybe your HOA took care of. But if you're in a situation where now it's your responsibility, you may not know some of this stuff. A lot of us maybe haven't mowed since we were kids.
Right.
We had to do it for the family, but maybe haven't done it in a long time. So we just want to cover some of the basic information about mowers to make sure that you're kind of up to date on what's out there and what's available.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, what still seems like a newish technology to a lot of
I
people
know.
are battery-powered lawnmowers. These have been around for a while, but if you've never seen one or used one, it may seem a little new to you.
I got to tell you, I'm spoiled now, Mike, because I went from a gas to a battery powered mower 2 years ago, and I'm totally spoiled. I'm not saying that you have to.
Right.
I'm just saying it has some really cool features, things that I love because I'm lazy.
Yep. Well, when they first came out, people were a little skeptical. Like, can you really operate a lawnmower off of a battery?
That was me.
Yeah, and
So
they were always good, but they've gotten better and better and better. And
yeah.
the technology has improved, and they're now very comparable or better in some cases
Yes.
to some folks than a traditional gas power
Mhm.
lawnmower. But some of the advantages are there's no gasoline, right? You don't have to worry about adding gas, buying gas, or storing gas. You don't have any gas.
Mhm.
Most of them have a push button start. When I was a kid, that was the hardest part of mowing was just getting the thing
Rip your
started.
shoulder out of socket.
Yeah, and that's gotten better on gas powered
Yeah.
mowers, but a lot of these have push buttons, so you don't have to deal with that at all. But people wonder how long do the batteries last, depending on the size of your yard and depending on how often you mow. There are some situations that impact that.
Yeah.
But in general, a battery will get you about a half an acre of usage. So if you've got a yard that's bigger than that, obviously you might want to have extra batteries on hand so you don't have to stop while you're mowing and charge. You can just change out the battery. So that's an easy thing to do. But just like other mowers, there are self-propelled models. There are manual if you want to go that route. Mulching and bagging is an option on these as well. Really, the only disadvantage is that they're a little bit more expensive
They
than
are
other mowers.
absolutely, absolutely. But I got to tell you though, once you use one, man, it's really hard to go back because I've got about an acre yard, like you said. I've got two large 40-volt batteries, and they both fit in there. So one is running, and one is just right there. When you're done, you just switch it out, right? And it cuts just as good as my gas mower ever did. Plus, it's self-propelled. And here's the thing about it: you can adjust how fast that thing will propel you. So, like, if I put roller skates on, it could probably just drag me all around the yard. Great. I mean, it really is. I've got a very, very hilly yard. So if that's something that you're really, dealing with,
Right.
that it's worth it. To me, it's totally worth it.
The other big advantage is that they're quieter.
Yeah.
Depending on when you mow, if you like to mow early in the morning and your neighbors don't like you mowing early in the morning, the quieter lawnmower is a good option.
It is. Last week I was cutting my grass. My wife came home and she couldn't find me. She's like, I've been looking all over for you. I was on the side of the yard cutting grass. She goes, I never heard the mower, which was great. My wife couldn't find me. So see, there's another good addition.
We'll add that to the list. That's another advantage. But now moving on, there's also corded electric,
Mhm.
which is just as the name implies. It's electric, but it's not running off a battery. It's actually running off a cord. So it has the same benefits as the battery operated, no gas, no fumes, no gas storage.
Right.
These are a little bit less expensive than the battery powered models, but whether or not you see this as a disadvantage, it depends on your yard, but they do have to be plugged in. So depending on the size, you might have to have a really long cord, and that's going to limit how many people can use these. You can't necessarily do a giant yard. And the other thing is, there is a cord that you've got to be aware of. So I always think of it as kind of like a vacuum cleaner. You know, when you're vacuuming, you've got to make sure that the cord is behind you all the time. It's the same way with these lawnmowers. Just make sure that it's behind you because it's easy sometimes to lose track of that and you can run over it, which you don't want to do.
But they are great, especially for small yards,
Absolutely.
townhomes. They work wonderful. The only other caveat to that too is read the manufacturer's suggestion for the right gauge of power cord, right? So power cords come in different gauges, 12, 14, 16, 18, and many of these mowers will recommend a specific type of cord. And you want to use a cord that's rated for outdoor use.
Right.
Don't use the extension cord you use to plug in your Christmas tree lights or things like that. So
Unless you're mowing in the house.
unless you're mowing in the house, it could
Generally
be.
not the case.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Now, moving to the next type, and that's a gas-powered, a traditional gas-powered lawnmower. Now, of course, these are a little bit less expensive than some of the newer, more advanced battery-operated and electric models. But, there is gas. Obviously, you've got to deal with that. You've got to store that. You've got to have it on hand when you're ready to mow. But these come with a lot of options too. Manual, self-propelled, variable speed, like you mentioned earlier. So a lot of the same things. And that's the other thing about some of these newer technologies. They're all comparable now. Everything that you see on one, you're likely to see on the other
Right.
options.
Yeah.
So it really just comes down to the power source that you're familiar with or prefer.
Yeah. And and again, the great thing about gas mowers, if you properly maintain them, they're going to last a very, very long time. Batteries do run out. Batteries eventually do wear out too.
Yeah.
And so you've got to replace those batteries. And then you run with the fact what maybe you could go with a brand and then 5, 6 years down the road when that battery is completely exhausted, have they changed the battery style?
Right.
So gas is another great option. Now I mentioned maintenance. I know you've talked to me a lot about maintenance on mowers too.
Yep. There's a lot of things that you have to do. Obviously, there's more maintenance with the gas powered
Sure.
because you've got the gas, you've got filters and spark plugs, things that just need regular maintenance. But real quick, I did want to mention one of the other disadvantages, depending on where you live, is that gas powered mowers are louder. We mentioned as battery powered are not as loud,
Mm.
but these obviously are louder. So something to think about depending on your situation.
Sure. Yeah. So but most of them do have the push button starts now, or that cord is not nearly as hard as it was back when we were kids. Let's talk about maintenance on these mowers. What about blade?
A lot of folks don't realize you need to sharpen that blade because
Yes.
like any other blade, the more it's used, the more it's going to start to wear down
Mhm.
and it won't be as sharp. What does that mean? It's still going to cut your grass, but it's not actually cutting your grass. The duller the blade is, it starts to rip the grass.
Yeah.
So you may not really notice that when you cut it because it's now shorter. That's what you want. But when you start looking at the grass, sometimes the edges are a little ragged. They can start to be brown.
Mhm.
And that can be an invite for infections and all kinds of situations with pests.
Yes.
So you don't want to do that. So the sharper the blade is, the better. And you want to sharpen it on a regular basis based on how often you use it. Do you have any suggestions? I'm not really sure how often you should do it, but
So we're typically for whether it's gas mower or corded or electric, typically you only need to sharpen about once a year
once a
at
year.
the beginning of the season. Now, when we say sharp, this is not razor sharp, right? You can drag your finger along that blade. It's not going to cut your finger. Might think it's dull. If you buy a new blade, it's as sharp as it needs to be.
Right.
Look at your blade, and if it's got little nicks or dings or cracks in it, you probably want to replace that blade, or you can actually sharpen it because they do get worn down over time. But yeah, usually about once a year is all you need to do it. And I think you've actually got some stuff there. Take a good close-up look at this. Yeah, that's a blade sharpening kit. Two little things there. The actual stone there you attach to a drill, right? And all you're going to use is kind of you bevel the edge of the blade. But the most important thing is after you've done, you don't want to make sure you've done one side
Right.
too much than the other. You actually got a balancing kit. You actually set it on top of that little balancing kit there. And as long as it balances, it's good to tie back on or reattach to your mower. So yeah, about once a year, and this is something that you can do yourself.
Yep. And again, people I think sometimes get a little concerned about the balancing. You can
Mhm.
switch back if you want.
Yeah.
About the balancing. don't worry so much about when you're actually doing it and try to visually make sure that they're
Yeah.
the same. It's really just about the balance. It's like a ceiling fan. When it's off balance, it's going to affect how it operates.
Yeah.
So as long as it's balanced on that little wheel,
Mhm.
then you're fine.
Very, very, very easy to do. Again, it
Yep.
just takes a drill and a little bit of time and a clamp, usually
Yep.
because you want to have it clamped down on one side. But
Right.
again,
Right.
so yeah, about once a year, right?
The other thing
Mm.
to think about is fuel. Again, this is one of those things where people don't realize it's a problem until they forget to do it, and it is a problem.
Yes,
But fuel goes bad over time, and
it
it
does.
storing your lawnmower for the winter, you have two choices. You can either empty out or burn out all of that fuel so it's empty.
That's what I do. I usually just run it until it
Yep.
completely is out.
Or if you just, you forgot that you're about to not need to mow anymore and you've
Mhm.
just filled it up, you can put a stabilizer in there.
Yeah.
There are stabilizers that you can add.
Yeah.
There you see it.
Yeah.
You add that to the gas and it helps it maintain, its integrity through the season. But yeah, people don't realize the gas can go bad. It gets really gummy
Hmm.
and it can clog up your carburetor. It can just really cause some problems in the fuel line. So you don't want to leave gas in your mower throughout the winter. So that's another thing you need to do. Like we talked about, spark plugs and filters.
Hmm.
If you're new to this and you don't realize, yes, they have spark plugs and they have air filters, those things wear out or get clogged over time. So you want to at least once a year, again, probably at the beginning of the season,
Hmm.
put in some new spark plugs, put in a new air filter, unless you have one that can be cleaned.
Hmm.
Sometimes it has to be replaced. Sometimes you can take it out and clean it and just put it back in once it's dry. So you have a couple of options on that. And then cleaning the deck.
Yeah.
Again, that's something
Yeah.
you never see that, so you don't think about it. But the underside of the lawnmower, that can get caked with grass over time, especially if you're mowing when it's a little bit wet, which you shouldn't do. We'll talk about it in that second.
Yeah.
But at least once a year or as often as needed, just look under there and see if it's starting to get a little caked up and just wash that off with a pressure washer or just a water hose.
Yeah, yeah, and just properly maintained, especially those gas mowers, properly maintained, they will last you for a decade. I'm still using mine that I bought, uh, well, 13 years ago,
Wow.
really. So still in great shape. And it's all those things that Mike just talked about, making sure just doing some proper maintenance. Don't run it without an air filter, right? So I've seen people like, oh, this is gummed up. I don't have a new one. I'm just going to run it anyway.
Yeah.
Don't, because you'll really damage the engine that way. You wouldn't run it. Think of it as your car. You wouldn't run your
Right.
car without an air filter as well. So
Now, what about the batteries? We talked a lot about
yeah.
gas powered, but there are some things you do with a battery if you have
Yeah.
a battery operated lawnmower.
So, most people think about mowing their lawns and it's hot, or spring, summer, whatever. You're mowing your lawn and everything, and you come back in, and wherever you store your mower, a lot of people maybe store them in a garage or in some type of
AC
but
unit, yeah.
yeah, something like that. You want to make sure the batteries are stored in a temperate zone, in a climate controlled zone. They don't want to get too hot and you don't want to let them get too cold either. So during the wintertime, don't just leave them out in the garage. Don't leave them in the actual machine.
Where the mower is.
Yeah, yeah, don't actually do that. Many of them, they have rechargeable stations, so you can kind of plug them into the rechargeable station, and many of them now will turn off when they're fully charged. So you can leave them in those charging stations, just make sure that that's somewhere that's, climate controlled or, is definitely out of the element because they will wear faster if you expose them to extreme heat and extreme cold. So just don't leave them outside or in your
Yep.
in your machine.
Now, moving on from mowers, we do want to talk about some of the other more popular lawn equipment that you'll use, and that's edgers and trimmers. Trimmers aren't for edging, and edgers aren't for trimming. So, and if you think about it, if you got to choose, trimmers are probably going to be used more often because they can get into areas where lawnmowers can't. They're
Exactly.
great for weeding and getting around little tight areas. So those are probably more common.
Mhm.
Edgers aren't obviously required.
They're just used for edging.
But I will tell you, my first home was a townhome and I had never had an edger.
Mhm.
I didn't even know what that was. And I used to mow because I had a little small yard and I didn't really worry about the edges until I got one and did it. And it makes a world of difference. You don't realize how manicured your lawn can look just by doing the trimming around the driveway, walkways, things like that. It makes a huge difference.
And it also helps the health of the lawn, believe it or not.
Right.
Because if that lawn grows over the sides of the driveway, any type of runoff or things that you have on the driveway, any type of chemicals, anything like that, that lawn's going to absorb it when you have the grass growing on top of it. If you keep it cut, you wind up with that little tiny notch there. It helps the lawn preserve itself. It stays away from heat. It does help the lawn not just look good, but actually feel good. At least that's what they tell me.
Now, one of the thing about these smaller lawn tools, You do have options for power, like you have cordless battery electric
Yep.
gas, just like you do with mowers. But for the batteries, you do want to think about getting matching batteries,
Mhm.
not just the brand, but the format, because sometimes across a certain brand and format of tool, you can use the same battery for a multitudes of tools.
So I have Ryobi and I've got a, battery operated mower that I told you about. The reason why I got the battery operated mower is because I got an edger. The edger is a 40 volt. The lawnmower is a 40 volt. I have a chainsaw. It's a 40 volt. I have an edger for my bushes, right? It's a 40 volt. So all my lawn equipment is the same battery. I have like 4 batteries for 6 pieces of equipment and they all work great. I love it.
That's great. Now, what about the gas oil mix? That's the other thing that people get confused with.
Yeah, so when you're using a small edger or trimmer that's gasoline powered, these are what's called a two-cycle engine. So they're a smaller engine. So there's no separate place for oil in that. So you actually have to mix the gas and the oil together. Big pitfall of mine, I can never get that ratio right. And so if you've got one of those and it's got a lot of smoke blowing out of it, you've got way too much oil mixed in with that mixture. If it's running really hot and shuts down after a few minutes, you've got way too much gas in that mixture. So that's just another added advantage of having battery operated.
Right.
If you are using a gas powered small tool, anything where you're using those two-cycle engines, make sure that you mix the oil and gas when you're going to use it. Because like Mike said, gas goes bad. Adding oil to it is going to go bad faster. So over the course of winter storage or something, you can't use that. And then you got to have a separate gasoline can because you can't mix the gas and oil in one can and then use that same gas later on for your lawnmower. You'll actually damage the engine. So a couple of caveats there. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to that. And it's not just any type of oil mixture in there. It's a two-cycle engine oil. So again, make sure you're following the manufacturer's recommendations. If you don't know, you can look up those different types of machines that you have. It'll kind of give you the balance. But a good rule of thumb, it's usually a two-cycle engine oil. It'll usually tell you that you need, a half of bottle of this to a gallon of gas, right? So that's another thing too. Gas cans, make sure that you kind of keep them separate. And same thing too. If you've got gas in a gas can, you can use that stable in it as well to keep it from going bad. But stable, they do make stable for oil and gas mix as well. So make sure you've got the right amount
Right.
or the right type of stable to use in those cans during the off season.
Moving on to other equipment. Not everything is
Hmm.
a power tool. There are other things that are manual that you have to have in the yard. Just wanted to run through exactly. We just wanted to run through some of those things to give you an idea of what's available and how to think about that. So again, when you're starting out, if you've never had a lawn or if it's been a long time, again, when I had that first townhouse, I didn't have any of this stuff because I never needed it.
I know.
And suddenly I was like, where do I start? What's the most important thing? So that's what generally people do. What am I going to use the most?
Mhm.
What is required for my yard? And then you start kind of adding on over time. But even things like rakes, all of these other tools that you use in the yard, they're all made for a very specific reason. Now, some people might think, oh, there's 20 kinds of rakes. Do we really need 20 kinds of rakes? They're all made for specific things. When
They
I
really
was
are.
a kid, we had one rake and it was a metal garden rake. It wasn't made for leaves, but we used it for that because it's the only one we had. But it would get stuck in the ground, it would get stuck on roots, it was pulling up grass. The big, plastic or metal, larger lawn leaf rakes are made to skim over the top and just pull up the leaves, which is what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So it's the same way with all of these tools I'm going to talk about. There are different options, but there's a reason there's different options.
Yeah, and so we do this garden bed workshop, and in that workshop, I talk to folks about if you're going to plant a garden bed, use a garden rake because it rips up that grass. It actually, rips up the soil.
It's
But
what it's designed
it
to
was
do.
designed for. If you're using that on your lawn, that ain't necessarily going to look so good. So yeah, the right tool for the right job. And again, these are not very expensive, and if you properly maintain them, they will last for years. My fan rake, again, I've probably had it for 13, 14 years. My pruning shears as well. So, just properly maintain them. But there's a lot of things that you should have. And again, it's not going to cost you a lot to get these things because you'll need them.
Right. And even things like wheelbarrows
Oh, yeah.
and garden gloves and shovels. If you look at shovels, there's a lot of different types of shovels. And can you get any shovel and dig? Absolutely.
But
But if you think about your yard and what you need the tool for,
Mhm,
it can help you decide between those different options because, again, some are made to work better
mhm.
and do certain jobs where others really aren't. So it's a reason to kind of think through. You don't have to buy 10 shovels,
No.
but you do want to think about which one makes the most sense for your yard.
And to kind of, piggyback on what you said earlier, if you want to dig in your yard, you wanna get a shovel that's spade, right? It's got a point to it. That sharpening kit that you showed earlier for lawnmower blades,
Yep.
you can use that on your shovel as well.
Now, we've talked a lot about lawnmowers. We haven't really talked about mowing itself.
So the few things you wanna make sure is, number 1, how do you mow? What is the height of the grass, okay? So people always ask, when do I mow? How often do I mow? Well, a lot of it starts depending on the height of the grass. Now, here's what I love about my battery-operated mower. So the thing about grass is you never wanna cut more than a third of the top off at any given time, okay? Because if you cut more than a third, you'll put the grass into shock, and if it's extreme heat or if we have a cold snap or if there's a lot of water, everything, you can cause it to get damaged, right? So grass is kind of like skin. It needs to grow, and you don't want to take too much off at any given time. So think about it like that. So 1/3 is maximum. My Ryobi mower that I love, you can actually adjust the wheels on the side, and it actually has adjustments in 1/4 inch increments. So it'll show you from 1 inch all the way to 4 inches. Now I have Bermuda, and so I usually like it to be about 2.5 inches, maybe 3 inches tall. So if you can only cut up to a third off at a time, that's really going to dictate when you should cut grass. Now, certain types of grass, you may like it a little bit longer. Like some people like Bermuda really, really short, right? Some people like it a little bit longer. It's okay. Just, nothing should really be over 4 inches in height. 4.5 inches is kind of max for much of the grass. Because anything taller than that, guess what happens? It starts shading its roots. It doesn't get enough sunlight. It can actually damage the light. So about 4.5 is kind of like ideal top. It shouldn't be any more than that. So,
And where people run into this probably more often than not is
mm,
if they don't mow very often, they'll
right.
forget to mow, they get busy, and they want to go out and just get
Just buzz it.
cosmic,
Yeah.
buzz it down to where it would have been had they been maintaining it.
Yeah.
To Joe's point, that's not what you want to do.
Yeah.
So if you're mowing on a regular basis, this isn't as much of a concern. But if you don't mow as often as maybe you should,
Mm.
you really need to think about this.
And a good rule of thumb is if you're using gas or a battery powered mower, you should be mowing minimum once a week. Okay, you really should be because especially in the summertime, that grass is going to grow that 1/4 inch or a third of an inch back over that time. So you want to kind of keep growing. Now, if it has, maybe you've been out of town. Mike, I know you love to travel.
I do love
Right? Okay, so you come back, it's been a couple of weeks, and that grass is really, really tall. Don't go out there and buzz it down. What you want to do is put it on the highest setting, cut off that top layer, and then lower it down.
just
Let it, yeah.
yeah,
And then and cut over it again. Because what you don't want to have happen is it just look like rows of clippings.
right.
You don't want rows of grass clippings sitting on your lawn. It does a couple things. First off, it blocks sunlight and nutrients from those roots. Another reason why you don't let your grass get too long. And then, yeah, it keeps water from getting that. So you wind up with streaks in your grass. So yes, you can use grass clippings on your lawn, but you don't want them in clumps. So if you have something that looks like a lawn like this, cut over it again, right? You can just if you have a mulching blade or something, you can cut right over it. If you don't have a bag, cut over this. You're not cutting any shorter. You're just going back over these lines and distributing those grass clippings throughout your yard.
Yeah, because think about it. Cut grass is an organic material.
It
It's
is.
going to decompose. It can be like a fertilizer to your lawn,
Yes.
but it's got to be small enough to get down near the roots and get below the surface of the grass.
Mhm.
If you haven't cut in a long time and you cut and you have what we saw in that picture, just big clumps, that's like anything else. If you've ever left, a piece of plywood or something in your
Right.
yard, it doesn't take long for that grass to start browning
Mhm.
because the sun isn't getting to it and it's blocking all the things that the grass needs. these clumps of grass are going to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
So people get confused. I thought you said you could leave grass in the yard. You can, but just make sure that it's mulched, it's ground up, and it's fine so it's not blocking the nutrients in the sun from getting to the grass.
Yeah, so just again, or use one of those garden rakes and rake it all up if you want to. All right. So now another question we get is when should I cut the grass? There's really no specific great time.
Time.
Right. It's when not to cut the grass we really want to focus on.
There are factors that you have to
Sure.
consider. Yes.
So let's say, for example, it's in the morning, it's a Saturday morning, beautiful Saturday morning. You're up, you're getting ready to cut grass, and there's dew all over your lawn. Should you cut grass then? No, don't do that. Never cut your grass when it's dewy or wet. As Mike told you earlier, when those blades come across, right, when it's wet, it's going to skim or it's going to rip the grass. That is not a good time to cut grass. So don't cut grass when it's dewy or when it's wet.
Not to mention it's dangerous because you can slip in wet
Absolutely.
grass, and you don't want to do that when you're mowing. So avoid wet grass.
Yeah. So we had this discussion. My neighbor and I were talking one day, and I was telling him about this. He said, "Well, I usually cut my grass at 10 o'clock. It's fine then." Yeah, my neighbor who lives across the street, the front of his house faces the east. So when the sun comes up, man, his lawn is pretty much dry by 9. My house faces his. My lawn is still in the shadow of my house. By 10 or 11, it's still dewy. So we live on the same street and we need to cut our grass at different times, right? So for me, it's typically in the evening. But another time you should never cut your grass is in the middle of the day when it's extremely hot.
It's the hottest time of the day.
Yes, because again, same thing. The grass is kind of laying down like this. It's absorbing the nutrients, and cutting it is just you could wind up scalping it because it's not standing up completely, right? So you want to make sure that the grass is dry and it's not in the middle of the day. So that's going to be anywhere between 10 a.m., 8 a.m., or 6 p.m., which is usually when I do mine here in Georgia.
Right. And another thing, the two things again that you need to avoid, hottest part of the day and wet grass. That's going to vary, like Joe said, depending on where you live. So if you've moved from one house where you're used to mowing at 10 o'clock in the morning, that won't necessarily work in a different house. So again, it's not the time of day, it's the time of day that makes sense for your yard. So figure out when that is and just keep to that schedule.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say, when you do mow your lawn, here's a little trick for you, okay? Never cut the same way every week. So if you're going from side to side in your lawn one week, the next week go up and down. Because if you keep going side to side, the grass is just going to get conditioned to lay that way a little bit, and you're not going to get that very clean cut. So go diagonal. I do patterns in my lawn. I'm just crazy like that. But yeah, so make sure that you mow different ways each time you mow.
You're not doing crop circles, are you? Just
No, not yet, but I got listen. I got an idea.
now, what about the other things that a lawn needs? Feeding, weeding, and seeding.
Yeah, speed, weed, and seed. We get so many questions about this. So let's talk about the first couple things. Fertilization is feeding your lawn. Okay, there's a lot of different ways to feed your lawn. One of the things you need to know before you feed your lawn is what type of soil you have. We'll talk about that in just a second. So fertilization, couple things you want to know. First off, if you have a new lawn, that means it has not gone through 2 complete growing seasons. That's typically 2 years for a lawn. Not always. There's some grasses that grow kind of like year round, right? But 2 complete growing seasons. If you haven't done that yet, any type of fertilizer you want to use a liquid fertilizer, and you can use those in what's called a RTU bottle like this. Kind of show you what it looks like. This is kind of like an RTU. You just kind of attach the hose right here and you can spray it on your lawn. You want to use liquids on those new lawns. The reason being is you're probably going to have little tiny gaps in it where the sod has been put down. Those granules can get stuck in there and they can actually cause streaks in your lawn. So use some type of liquid fertilizer. For established lawns, you're in that 3rd year of growth, whatever, you can use granulars, right? And what you want to do is you want to be able to spread those. So there's a couple of different ways you can spread those. We've got things like this manual spreader right here. This is actually battery operated. You can put a battery into it and it's spread it around. You've got your walk behind spreaders like this. You can actually dial them to the certain level it says to spread over 5,000 feet or 5,000 square feet or what have you, and it'll put down the right amount. Don't use a solo cup. Don't just spread it out there by hand because number one, that's dangerous. And number two, you're going to spread it unevenly. The biggest pitfall I see people making is they over fertilize. They're like, I can't see it, so I'm going to put more right here. No, you're going to burn the lawn, right? So you want to make sure that you spread it evenly, and then you want to make sure it's watered within 48 hours. If you know it's going to rain, that's a great time to fertilize your lawn as well. So really cool things to do with fertilization. When do you do it? You can actually fertilize your lawn year round, right? The one thing I tell people not to do is if your ground is frozen, if you've got a hard frost coming, don't fertilize because you're just wasting your money.
Or if you might have one
Now
coming.
you might have one coming. Rule of thumb here in the South, my grandmother told me this years ago. She said, don't plant, don't fertilize, don't seed, don't do anything until after Easter, and you'll make sure that there's no more frost coming. That's here in Georgia. It could be different.
Depends on where you are.
The next question we get a lot about is when do I need to weed? When do we add pre-emergence and post-emergence? Well, Mike, you and I were laughing earlier because pre-emergence means you need to add that.
Before the weed emerges.
Exactly. That's why it's called pre-emergent. So if you're seeing the weeds, it's not time for
Like,
pre-emergent. Yeah. Now there's post-emergence. You can use post-emergence, which are exactly for those weeds that have they've sprouted. So pre-emergence really should go down in the late fall, again, before frost and things like that. And during the wintertime, you can actually add those during the wintertime as well, regardless of the soil temperature. Those are really good to keep those weeds from growing back. So many of you may be working on your lawn this year for results next year. That's the other thing to remember. Um, so pre-emergence, you can put those down. Post-emergence can be put down, especially after you've seen the weeds. So you can fertilize and you can put down weed. You can feed and you can weed at the same time. You can. And there are many processes out there, many types of products,
like combo product.
combo products that are feed and weed. Absolutely. You can do that at the same time. So then we get the question, when do I seed? I want to overseed. Couple things. Number one, the best time to overseed is in the fall, okay? Before it gets too cold. The seeds germinate, they start to grow, and then they go dormant, and in the spring, they really pop. You can really start seeing them. In the spring, you can overseed. Just know you want to make sure there's no frost coming, right? But it's going to take a while for those seeds to get established before you actually see any growth out of it. And then there's some products out there. There's like the Easy Seed, which is rapid growth, right? This actually, you can spread it out and it'll grow rapidly, but this is for just a small area, so not for your entire lawn. What people make the mistake of doing is that they seed and then they fertilize, and that's okay, and then they put down that weed killer, which actually kills the seeds or damages the seeds.
Right.
So if you're going to do any weeding, if you're going to do any type of products that post-emergent or pre-emergent, do not seed for at least 2 weeks. I usually recommend 2.5, 3 weeks, okay? Because you want that herbicide to be completely gone before you put down the seed. So you can feed, you can weed, you can feed, you can seed, but you cannot weed and seed.
Real quick, I think fall, again, is the right time to do it, but people maybe don't think that. It doesn't feel very intuitive because summer's over. You're not really thinking about your yard as much. You're going into the winter. The grass is going to go to sleep. It's going to hibernate. But think about it. The soil is still warm from the summer.
Yep.
There's probably a lot more moisture generally in the fall, which is important for grass, and there's not as much activity. You're not doing as much in your yard. For all those reasons, it's another good time. The fall is a good time to do this.
Yeah, it is. And keep in mind, having that great looking lawn that we were talking about earlier, this is not a one-time thing. You just do one thing and then it's done. No, it is an ongoing process. And so many of you may be trying to get your lawn ready to be that perfect lawn next year. Now, when you're buying all these products, we always see numbers on the back of these. There's usually 3 numbers, okay? And these products always tell us a few things. They tell us basically how much nitrogen is in there, how much potassium, and how much calcium is in there. Now, nitrogen makes things green. So if you want, really green grass, and if you're adding some type of product, it's probably going to be higher in nitrogen than it is in anything else. If you're using plant food, typically it's going to be something with a little bit more potassium or phosphorus in it, right? These are the things that make sure that your plants are very, very healthy. So we talked about all this. We talked about, hey, testing your soil and everything. So there are some things you can get. You can actually get a soil testing kit. Mike picked one of these up the other day. It's great. You can actually test for nitrogen, you can test for phosphorus, you can test for potassium. And then what I actually love is just testing for this right here. This is actually the pH level. And all you do with this, you put a little soil in it. They're color coded, green, green. You put one of these tablets in, you just crack it open, pour it with water, shake it up. It's like testing pool water, and you wind up, you can see what the pH level is. So we've got it, yeah, again, so
There's different ones for
different
different
things.
processes, yeah.
So I always test the pH level first because pH level is very important to grass. Now grass loves, so pH level basically goes from, 0 to 14, right? There he goes from, being too acidic, being too alkaline. Grass really likes it between 5.2, 5.7 to 6. So grass can take it just a little bit more, but like azaleas don't really like anything over like 5.4. So if your grass is doing great, but your azalea is not, well, that means it's probably a lot higher in pH. And so you can test that too. But there's something else you can, there's other types of things too, if you don't want to use anything like that.
This is just an electronic tester that you actually stick in the ground and it kind of gauges it for you. So there's different methods, but they're all useful to help you kind of figure out where you stand.
And they're really cheap. They'll help you know what your lawn needs. People ask us all the time, well, I live in, Maine. How do I know what type of, fertilizer I need for a lawn? Well, here's the good news. If you go to the Home Depot in Maine, odds are they're going to be carrying the fertilizer from most of those grass types there.
Right.
They're not going to have a lot of things for grass types that you would find in Georgia. So your local Home Depot is going to have those things. But make yourself a little bit more educated. Grab one of these tests. They're very cheap to pick up. You can actually test. You know exactly what the pH level is in your soil. You know what you would need to add. You could test and see, is it low in nitrogen? Is it low in phosphorus? Is it too high in those areas? What do I need to add? When you see all those beautiful lawns in your neighborhood, rest assured someone has tested that soil. It might not be the owner. They may actually have someone do it, but
Right.
we want to empower you to do this as well.
Yes, because again, certain plants require a different mixture of those things we talked
Yeah.
about. But in order to know what's appropriate or to address a problem with something that you planted, you've got to kind of know where your soil is and make those adjustments. So that's why these tests are so important.
They're absolutely most important.
Now, what about some specific products, Joe, for different things like weeding and seeding?
Okay, so there's a lot of different things that you can get. I showed you some of this easy seed. You've got something like this, the Scots. This is the rapid grass, tall fescue mix. Don't mix and match your grass seed, folks. If you don't know what type of grass you have, then that is something you may want to go to like the local 4-H. You can actually go to some type of farm extension, Farm Bureau extensions. They can kind of tell you what grass that you typically have. There are warm season grasses and cold season grasses. Um, you know, it- and if you've got, so well, I've got grass and it's just not growing under this tree, it's not doing very, very well. Well, it's not really the grass, that's actually the shade of the tree. That will actually cause a lot of problems too. Uh, so, so, overseed is fine. If you've got a bare spot and that bare spot's kind of growing right next to a garden bed, if you're gonna overseed there, it might actually be the tree that's causing that problem, not just lack of grass seed. So again, a lot of different products that you can use. I personally love doing this. This is how I overseed my lawn. Or Mike, you know this, I have 7 dogs, okay? And in my backyard, dog urine, it will damage grass. The enzymes in it will actually brown the grass. And what happens when that grass gets brown, it'll sometimes die, and then you got a little mud hole there, and when it rains or you water it, that mud hole gets bigger and bigger and bigger, so you got these little brown spots. So what I like to do is I make a mixture. I take my Homer bucket, this is a 5-gallon bucket, and what I do, and this is just me, you can figure out what works best for you, but I use a bag of grass seed, and then I mix in 1/3 sand, 1/3 garden soil, and 1/3 topsoil. And those are different things. Garden soil is very fluffy, right? It's got a lot of nutrients in it. Topsoil has a few sticks and sometimes debris in it. I try to clean out those sticks. But what happens is when you mix in that seed with that stuff and you fill those holes with it, Well, the grass seed and the garden soil, they really combine very good together, right? It helps kind of hold in moisture. I mean, the topsoil helps level out those areas, and then the sand helps the existing grass around kind of grow in together. So it's a great way to kind of fill some of those holes. So, you need to do that too before you start, watering your lawn or cutting your lawn as well.
Yep. Real quick, one of the things that I wanted to mention about these spreaders that people may not realize, they're made to distribute the seed very evenly,
Hmm.
which is great when you're in the middle of your yard. But what happens when you're next to a flower bed
Hmm.
or next to a driveway where you don't want the seed necessarily spreading all over the place?
Hmm.
A lot of these have a guard built in them so you can kind of block
Yeah.
where the seed's going. So that's very helpful when you get to the edge of your yard and you're near things where you don't want the seed to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, use a spreader whenever you can.
One of the most important things is watering. You want to do it often enough. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to underdo it. But how
Yeah.
do you know? Like, where do you start with watering?
I have no clue. No. Okay, so I'm spoiled. I actually have a irrigation system. I've got a a watering system. So that really helps me know when and how much to water. The first thing you need to know is that grass takes it needs about an inch of water a week. Okay. And just because we had 2 inches of rain on one day doesn't mean your grass is done for the week.
Right.
Because a lot of that water ran off. If it's nice, sprinkle, nice gentle rain over the course of several hours, that's great for your lawn. If it's a downpour and you can see, we call them in the South here, you might remember gully washers.
Well, I grew up in Tennessee. We called them a Tennessee toad strangler.
Okay.
That's what it's
Tennessee
called.
toad strangler. Okay. So if you have a Tennessee toad strangler, that water is not getting into your lawn. It's running off. So you need to make sure your water gets your grass gets watered about an inch over the course of a week. Now, how do you figure that out? Really easy. You can take a screwdriver. Take a screwdriver and you go out in your lawn and you push that screwdriver into your lawn. It's kind of like checking to see if a cake is baked all the way through. If that screwdriver goes in relatively easy, then your lawn's it's got enough moisture. If it's not going in very easy, then it needs to be watered more. If you can stand on your grass and you remove your foot and it stays, you can see a footprint in it, it needs more water.
Yep.
Right? So there's a couple things to remember about that. The other thing is when to water. So told you I'm spoiled, right? My irrigation system is set to 4:45 in the morning because watering early is the best time to water your lawn because if you water it in the middle of the day, water's not going to get all the way into it. It's going to evaporate.
You're wasting water.
Yes.
It's costing you more money, and the grass is not getting the water that it needs.
Yeah, and you told me a great fact earlier about how if I don't have an irrigation system, if I'm using some type of sprinkler or something like that, how long should it run?
Well, there's a couple of things to think of. If you've got a sprinkler system and you have no idea really how much water is actually getting into the grass, there's a couple of things you can do. People have done this forever. You can put something out to collect the water and just measure it over time to figure out how much water is actually getting to the grass. But in general, most sprinklers water about a quarter of an inch
Mm.
an hour.
Okay.
So to get that, you would want to do it for 4 hours. The other thing to know, the more incentive the roots of the grass have to go deeper into the soil, the more robust and healthy your grass is going
Yeah.
to be. If you water often, but for just little periods of time, that water is never going to soak down into the soil. So the roots don't have any reason to dig down into the soil. So the deeper the water is, the more thorough your watering is, the more healthy your lawn's going to be because those roots have an incentive to dig deeper to get the water. And that's going to make it more drought resistant,
Yeah.
healthy, just more robust.
Yeah, the root system in and of itself is key, and so like Mike said, watering is a big piece of that as well. A couple other things we talked about. If your lawn is unhealthy for any reason, you've got those brown patches we talked about. There could be a lot of different things. You could if you have animals, the enzyme in their urine can damage that, right? If you have brown patches in different areas and you're getting plenty of water, right? Maybe you hand spread your fertilizer. You could have put too much fertilizer in one area. Your lawn shouldn't be very patchy. And if you do have several brown patches and you don't have any animals, and you have been fertilizing and everything, you may have some type of infestation from bugs like grub
You
worms.
might have animals.
Yeah,
They're just not,
just not the kind
they're
of
not your pets.
yeah, they're not your pets, right? I mean, yeah, no, that would be. And long grubs, and so there are good bugs and there are bad bugs. Unfortunately, Bad bugs typically outnumber the good bugs. So
Right.
how do you get rid of them? A lot of different products you can use. One of the easiest things you can actually introduce good bugs into your lawn. Ladybugs are great for lawns. Praying mantises are great for your lawn because they will actually attack and kill those
The
other
bad bug.
the bad bugs, right? So you go good bugs. It's you can so that will actually help your lawn. So you're not having to use pesticides and things like that. But if you do have an abundance of bad bugs, you've got some predatory mites, ants, things like that. Well, don't pour. I see people do all this. Don't pour any type of liquid or like boiling oil or gasoline on ant mounds. Yeah, you may kill the top of the mound, but you're really going to damage that root system Mike was talking about all the way around. So you're going to kill your grass as well. So a couple things we do recommend. If you've got bugs and there are types of bugs that create mounds, okay, use some granular type of pest control. They will take those granulars down into the nest and they'll kill it from the inside out.
Yep.
And it won't damage your grass either. So there's the other great thing.
And when you're getting insecticides, there may be something advertised on the front of the packaging, the bug that you're trying to get rid of,
Mm,
but always read the back of the package
yes.
because it's going to affect other things too. You want to make sure that what you're using is not adversely affecting the bugs that you want to keep. So just make
Yes.
sure that you know everything that it's affecting and make sure that what you want to keep is not on that list.
And other things on that label, it will tell you how safe it is when you can walk on that. If you've got pets, if you've got children, it will tell you, it dries 5 minutes. And many of it will tell you, don't use right before watering because you're going to just kind of,
Wash
spread it.
away.
Yeah, wash away. I actually like using the granulars because, again, it'll do a great job of keeping things free and clear. If you do have those brown spots and it is caused by something like lawn grubs or things like that, there are specific topical treatments, but don't just treat the brown spots. You want to treat your entire lawn. And they do migrate. So if you see something in your neighborhood and someone's got an issue with like that, you can actually start putting that stuff down now. And again, they're granulars, they're RTUs. You can spread them out, using your hose, using your spreader. You can actually have services do that as well. Some people always ask us, well, I saw this service and what do you think about those? Well, that's great. I like doing my lawn. I take pride in doing everything myself. And believe it or not, it's actually cheaper in the long run to do it yourself than to hire a company because every time a company comes out, it's like $50, right? Even if you wanted to aerate your lawn, that's something else. It's a great thing to do, especially in the spring. You can aerate your lawn. Literally, what you're doing is you're plugging in holes to let some of that moisture and air get down to those roots and nutrients get down those roots. It leaves little tiny plugs, and you just let them there. They dissolve in it. Great thing to do, especially in the springtime. Just never aerate your lawn when you have a drought.
Right. And that's one of the questions that we get a lot in the workshops is A, do I really need to aerate? How often do I need to do it? It's one of those things like we mentioned at the beginning. There are things that everyone should be doing,
Mm,
but maybe you've never done it. Maybe you didn't even know that was a thing.
yeah.
But to your point, the more compacted your soil gets, and it does get compacted over time with activity, if you're playing in the yard, just over time it's going to settle. The harder it is for those nutrients in the water to get down to the roots where they're needed, which is why you need to aerate. It just pokes hole. If you don't know what that is, there are tools you can push them.
Yes.
You can attach them to a lawn tractor and pull them through the yard,
Mm,
but it's just a big round device. It's got all these spikes on it and it pokes holes in your yard.
yeah.
And it pulls out plugs of dirt,
Yeah.
opens up the soil and allows those things to get down where they're needed. So it is very important and you should do it.
The best thing I ever did for my lawn. The house that we live in now, it was a brand new house, and do not do this to a new lawn. Again, you want to at least have two growing seasons. The fourth year I was there in that house, I had lawn aerated, and the next year I had my lawn's been great, and I've never missed a year since. So
So, we've talked about a lot of things today, and it can seem a little overwhelming, again, especially if you're new to your house. But one other thing to think about, the better you maintain your lawn, the healthier your lawn is, the less likely you are to have a big weed problem anyway,
yeah,
because weeds and grass are competing for all the same things. If your lawn is not healthy, it means that the weeds are winning or they can win the battle.
yes,
So if you're worried about weeds, people are always going to have weeds. It's an ever present problem. but the healthier your lawn is, the less of a problem the weeds are probably going to be. So that's one thing to keep. That's another incentive to keep your lawn healthy.
Keep your lawn healthy, you know, and again, you want to keep those bushes and shrubs pruned back so they get enough light. And if you really like the tree and you've got grass dying, expand your garden bed. We show you how to do that. Got another great workshop about that as well. And listen, maybe you've watched this and you're thinking to yourself, "What now? I got to go get all this stuff.
All this stuff.
I got to get all this stuff, but I just got this little tiny Honda Civic. How am I going to get a lawnmower home?" A couple things you can do. We actually do offer truck and van rental. You can rent these by the day, get all these products, mulch, grass sod, bags of grass seed, and have it loaded onto the truck, bring it home, unload it, and take the truck back. They're really great. I have used them before because I have a tiny truck.
Right. And people don't think sometimes it's not just if you're hauling stuff home from Home Depot. If you need a truck and you don't have one, you can rent it to do whatever you need to do with
Sure.
it. But it really comes in handy, like Joe said, if you're at the store and you've got all this stuff and it just won't fit in your car, or you just don't want to put it in your car. Maybe you got a new car and you don't want all the stuff in there. You can always rent these. They're inexpensive, relatively, but they're inexpensive, unlimited mileage, so they're really handy and they're right there where you need them. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, just another easy way to do it. So, folks, that was a lot of information for in just an hour. We talked about mowing, we talked about feeding, weeding, and seeding. We talked about watering, and the great thing is in about an hour you'll get a link to a recording, right?
Yep.
You can always watch this. And if you want to, and maybe we've got your interest in some other things, we've got a lot of other workshops, a lot of other DIY workshops where we actually demonstrate things for you to do.
Yep.
We've got other workshops about creating garden beds. We've got how to prepare your lawn for spring, different types of grasses, all these other questions that you may have. We would love to see you join us in those, if you
Yeah.
would.
And if you're ever curious about what's available, you can just go to homedepot.com and search for workshops.
Yeah.
It will bring you to the page that shows our available live workshops, our on-demand workshops, and it will allow you to sign up for those and show you the availability of those.
Absolutely. So, on behalf of Mike, myself, our entire homeowner 101 team, folks, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks for shopping at the Home Depot.
Bye bye.